Ladies and gentlemen, a while ago we sang a national anthem which had a phrase, "We stand on guard for thee," and that is why we are here.
Yeah!
Thank you very much for coming today to express your concern over portions of Bill 2, which are a potential threat to the freedom to raise children in accordance with one's cultural or faith-based values. I'm speaking on behalf of an organization called Citizens for Diversity in Education. And that organization, which has over time representation at its meetings from many different peoples, religions, cultural backgrounds, totaling roughly a number representing close to 250,000 people in the Edmonton region. And all of these people are very concerned from many different perspectives over some of the implications of including Section 16 in the current proposed bill. To this end, Citizens for Diversity in Education has prepared a letter which I understand has been sent to the Premier and Minister very recently. And I will read it to you. To the Premier, Minister of Education, Mr. Thomas Lukasik, and all members of the Legislative Assembly. It is with deep unease that we express our concerns with Bill 2, the Education Act, as it is currently written. We remind the government that in the vast majority of Alberta's families, parents are the people who care most deeply for their children and who are in the best position to decide what is in the child's best interest. Whether those interests be educational, moral, physical, spiritual, emotional. Parental rights are human rights. And while we appreciate the recent gesture by the government to amend the preamble of Bill 2, we understand it in truth has little significant effect in law, and we ask that Section 16 of the Education Act be clarified and amended. We are also concerned that the inclusion of the Alberta Human Rights Act in Section 16 could expose any Albertan informed by a religious or cultural perspective on a variety of different doctrinal or cultural issues to prosecution by the Alberta Human Rights Tribunal. And we ask you to confirm with the many verbal assurances that this is not the government's intent by amending Bill 2 of the Education Act to address these concerns.
Yes!
To that end, we ask the Legislative Assembly amend Section 16 by striking out Section 16 of the Act and replacing it with the following. Section 16, respect. 1. Parents have a prior right in choosing the type of education their children will receive.
Yeah!
Item 2. Education programs offered and instructional materials used in schools must not promote or foster doctrines of racial or ethnic superiority or persecution, religious intolerance or persecution, social change through violent action or disobedience to laws.
Yeah!
It has been signed respectively by the list of organizations that are a part of Citizens for Diversity in Education, and all of those groups have not yet formalized that signature, but more will be coming. But it includes the Association of Christian Schools International, Strathcona Christian Academy Society, the Meadowlark Christian School Society, Millwoods Christian School Society, Real Women of Canada, Congregations of the Living Church of God, Grace Point Church, Millwoods Pentecostal Assembly, Calvary Evangelical Lutheran Church, the Olive Tree Fellowship, the Empty Tomb Ministries, Living Waters Christian Academy, Logos Society of Edmonton, Lighthouse Pentecostal Church, and others will be undoubtedly following. I had a career in education that spans over 40 years as a teacher, principal, and central office administrator. The School Act is a very important part of your work in education. And yet the threatened disengagement of parental rights is in fact contrary to existing sections of the School Act, which enable students to be educated in either private, charter, public, separate, or homeschooling venues, and in permitting education predicated on religious grounds and cultural linguistic grounds. So why does this letter that I have just read reference so strongly Section 16? In all my years as an educator, I have worked under the terms of the School Act that was responsible to the minister and the elected legislature. Bill 2 changes a very important aspect of this. Section 16 replaces the determination of the acceptability of all content, teaching resources, and by extension even verbal instruction, to be under rather the Human Rights Act. Thus, subsequent to passing of Bill 2, interpretation and enforcement will no longer fall directly under the purview of the minister and the department, or even under the authority of the elected legislature, but rather into the hands of a non-elected Alberta Human Rights Commission and Tribunal. And this is an organization which has more than once been censured by the courts for blatantly wrong interpretations and convictions of a most biased and some would say extremist nature. And is this how Alberta education is to be monitored? We thus are seeing in this Act changes that we would like to see in this Act that make it fair to all, that respects all human rights, including parental rights, rights which have been entrenched in law by the Supreme Court of Canada in a ruling earlier by Judge Dixon. We are requesting an Act that contains the wording similar to the 2008 School Act, which has been read to you already, the wording that we desire, which is comprehensive, protective, respecting of all rights, including the right to express politely and respectfully a dissenting opinion.
Yeah!
This is the essence of freedom of speech and allows for an expression of freedom of religion, culture, and religious expression. We are requesting an Act that is respectful also of multicultural perspectives, given that multiculturalism is another foundational pillar of this province. And we are requesting an Act that is not in contradiction to the existing legislation which protects parental rights and the free exercise of alternate educational options guaranteed within the School Act. We are requesting an Act that is accountable to the elected legislature and not a non-elected body.
Yeah!
No one in government has offered a reasonable explanation as to why Section 16 is replacing the existing Section 3.
That's right!
It makes one wonder if there is a hidden agenda or perhaps a secret agreement.
Yeah!
The disregarding of parental rights as a paramount right in the education of children clearly seems to be the intention of Section 16, and this will significantly compromise the ability of parents to pass on to their children cultural and/or faith-based values. Schools have a valued place in our society, but their role was never intended to be a place where the state would contradict the faith and cultural values of parents. Millions of people have fled other countries to come here to avoid such. We thus appeal with all respect to the Minister, the Premier, and the elected members of the legislature to ensure they do their part to perpetuate a truly free and open society in Alberta, one in which tolerance and understanding of all perspectives is allowed to flourish within our educational system, and one in which the right of a parent to choose educational context for their child is safeguarded. Hundreds of thousands of Albertans will be watching and taking note. Thank you very much.
It's been said the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. It is my intense honor to be here with over 1,600 people who care more about their freedom than about the temperature of their bodies, than about what they're doing on a Monday. Alberta will never be the same for what you're doing here today. Never underestimate it. They already told you I'm a lawyer. I ask you not to hold that against me today. But because of that, I got the job of going through some of the sections and just laying out how critically important this is. Section 16, as currently written in Bill 2, says all courses or programs of study offered and instructional materials used in a school, and I'm going to take you through the definition of what that means, must reflect the diverse nature and heritage of society in Alberta, promote understanding and respect for others, and honor and respect the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Alberta Human Rights Act. That must come out. Now, a lot of people have been told a lot of things, but let's look at these words of this proposed bill. School means a board, a person responsible for the operation of a private school, a parent providing a home education program. This applies to us or the minister. It applies directly to us, and we want it changed. For private schools, Section 29(4) of the Act specifically says the minister may cancel or suspend the registration or accreditation of a private school if the person responsible for the operation of the private school permits courses, programs of study, or instructional materials that do not comply with Section 16. It doesn't get much clearer than that. We live in a country that is ruled by laws, not individuals. It doesn't matter what individuals say, it matters what laws say. I want to quickly address the claim that there's protection for us in the Alberta Human Rights Act. All that protection does, in a very small way, is allow students to opt out. It does not allow private schools to teach what they believe. It does not allow homeschoolers to teach what they believe. We have this strange provision in here that would allow, for example, homeschooling parents to have letter writing contests with themselves in which they would attempt to opt out their own children from the programs they're being forced to teach those same children. This is strange, unusual, and it needs to be changed. I want to read you a quick quote from an article that was in the Calgary Herald. I was reading it from the airplane as I was going through this stuff. And it says, I think better than anything, the problem with the Alberta Human Rights Act, and specifically why we don't want this brought into our schools and our homes. It is, I quote here, "It is difficult to imagine a greater public policy fiasco in a state branch in greater disrepute than human rights commissions. Human rights are essential, but their enforcement by commissions has an appalling record of violating religious liberty, censoring the press, and abusing fundamental legal rights of Canadians." Numerous legal malformations afflict the commissions. They lack definition of the terms they use to prosecute citizens. They offer no presumption of innocence. They don't require their investigators to behave ethically and legally. They don't prohibit third-party accusations. They welcome double jeopardy. They don't require speedy procedures. They grant no right to cross-examine accusers, and they provide no procedural safeguards regarding the collection of evidence, entrapment, hearsay, and self-incrimination. Is that what you want in your province? People, thank you for being here. It is my privilege to be here with you.